The dusty auction yard buzzed with low chatter as battered gates creaked open and weeds danced in the warm wind around the wooden ring where ranchers tested their luck on payday. A loudspeaker praised glossy stallions and sleek mares, making the gathered crowd cheer as if each horse already wore a wreath of blue ribbons. When an injured chestnut mare with a swollen knee hobbled forward, the cheers died to uneasy whispers that fluttered like nervous sparrows. Parents pulled children closer, whispering that the poor animal deserved rest, not a spotlight. Near the back ropes stood a lean cowboy in a sun-bleached hat, his weather-lined face softening as he watched the mare drop her head in quiet shame. He noticed how she set hardly any weight on her left foreleg, every shaky step kicking up a cloud yet trying to look proud. Two boys snickered that she looked like a broken fence post pretending it still mattered, earning approving nods from a few adults. The auctioneer started the bidding high, but his own echo made it clear nobody thought the horse worth half that figure. Each unanswered call thumped his gavel harder, rattling the plank floor but stirring no sympathetic pockets. The cowboy heard a soft breath escape the mare, more sigh than snort, as though she sensed her fate sliding from rough to worse. Sunlight struck her coat, revealing patches of dried salve and scars shaped like crooked lightning across her shoulder. A dusty breeze carried the scent of hay and distant rain, stirring a memory in the cowboy of another hurt horse that once saved him during a storm. In that long-ago night, he was young and half-lost until a patient mare refused to let him quit, guiding him home through miles of prairie dark. That memory warmed his chest beneath his faded denim jacket like campfire embers. He stepped closer to the fence, boots crunching gravel, ignoring the puzzled looks that turned toward him. The mare flinched yet kept her gaze on him, brown eyes wide but not wild, curious through the fear. He whispered softly about storms passing, good hay tasting sweet, and every journey starting with a shaky step. The auctioneer, sweating under a crooked tie, called one last price, so low it felt like an insult tossed across the ring. Even that plea met silence. Handlers moved to lead her toward the exit gate where unwanted animals often journeyed to bleak endings. Before she vanished, the cowboy raised a gloved hand and cleared his throat in a voice that carried over the dust. Gasps rippled through the bleachers. Nobody expected a bid on the limping creature. A polished buyer twirled his catalog, shrugged, and decided not to compete for such trouble. The cowboy named a modest sum that would empty his week's earnings yet leave just enough fuel money to get home. The auctioneer hammered once, twice, then slammed the block and declared, "Sold." A slow murmur spread, part pity, part curious respect, as people wondered if the man had lost his senses or gained a secret. A little girl tugged her father's sleeve asking why the cowboy wanted a broken horse when shiny ones were everywhere. The father muttered about lost causes, but the cowboy only smiled, as if the question itself held the answer. The mare stretched her neck toward the fence, nostrils brushing rough timber, searching for the stranger's scent. He held out his hand, letting her sniff before he dared stroke the soft tuft between her eyes. Sunlight slid out from behind a cloud, filling the ring with promise poured straight from the sky. Dust motes sparkled around them like tiny lanterns celebrating a small victory. "Hope," he said softly, tasting the name on his tongue, a title too strong to be fragile. The mare flicked an ear as if agreeing that hope was lighter than pain. Relief crossed the auctioneer's red face. At least one difficult lot was gone before lunchtime gossip started. The cowboy opened the gate himself and guided the mare with slow, coaxing steps, so each uneven stride felt safer than the last. Behind them, the auction continued, numbers rattling like dice across worn boards, but he no longer listened. The mare limped yet followed, trusting the rhythm of his calm voice as he pointed them toward a waiting trailer. He paused to adjust the lead rope, letting her breathe while patting her mane as though smoothing stories of neglect away. Voices behind him tossed words like foolish and brave, but he kept his gaze on the blue hills marking home. The mare lowered her head to his shoulder, and in that small lean, he felt her fear begin to shift toward belief. The cowboy guided his pickup along the two-lane highway, trailer swaying gently behind while the chestnut mare shifted her weight to find a spot where the floorboards did not bump her sore knee too hard, a spark of bravery lighting his tired eyes. Dusky light painted the distant mesas lavender, and every few miles he whispered small promises out the back window, so the horse would remember she was not alone anymore, and relief fluttered like a small bird inside him. Static from the old radio crackled through news and songs, but he kept the volume low, preferring the steady rhythm of tires against asphalt as a lullaby, while his heart drummed a steady promise. When the fuel gauge dipped toward empty, he rolled into a lonely service station whose only company was a row of flickering moth-filled lamps sending silent prayers toward the twinkling horizon. A teenage attendant peered into the trailer, lips parting at the sight of the limp yet alert animal, and asked if she would be all right, unsure why kindness could feel this daring. The cowboy answered that healing likes time and kindness, two gifts bigger than any medicine bottle, and the boy nodded as if learning a secret worth remembering, each word tasting like fresh river water. He bought Diesel a bottle of water for himself, and a handful of bright orange carrots that the mare sniffed before crunching with grateful enthusiasm, and the noise of crunching carrots made him grin. Back on the road, he watched the odometer tick past familiar landmarks, cattle guards, mailboxes, and an abandoned schoolhouse whose playground swings squeaked in the wind, memories drifting past deserted landmarks. Each landmark felt like a chapter turning, carrying both of them farther from the cruel auction yard and nearer to fresh hope, the past shrinking like roadside dust. Night slipped across the sky, laying a blanket of stars so plentiful it looked like spilled sugar, and still he drove, steering smooth to spare her unnecessary jolts, under a quilt of scattered constellations that mirrored the gentle rocking of the trailer. Moonlight trickled through the trailer slats, casting moving stripes across the mare's coat and calming her more than any spoken assurance, the rolling shadows calming both travelers. Past midnight, a coyote yipped from the sage flats, yet the horse remained steady, ears flicking at the sound but heart trusting the driver's calm presence, its bright echoes fading into the calm night. Finally, the wooden archway of the ranch appeared, its weathered sign reading Lazy Ridge swinging softly, welcoming them home like a patient grandparent, greeting him like an old friend returned. Gravel popped beneath tires until the truck rested beside the cedar barn, whose paint had peeled in red ribbons over years of wind and sun, peeling paint whispering of years gone by. The cowboy hopped down, joints stiff from the ride, and opened the trailer door with a quiet scrape that startled an owl from the loft, causing the owl to wheel silently upward. Soft words guided the mare down the ramp. She hesitated, tested the ground, then stepped onto the moonlit yard with surprising steadiness, while moon haze silvered her ragged mane. Crickets filled the silence while she inhaled the smell of hay, mesquite, and distant creek water, scents that promised safety instead of judgment, filling her lungs with promises of peace. He led her into a wide stall blanketed with fresh straw where a bucket of lukewarm mash waited like a homemade welcome banner, a stew of oats and molasses waiting patiently. After unfastening the lead rope, he crouched to inspect her swollen knee, tracing the edges of bruising that had already started to fade in patchy yellows, bruises blooming softer shades of lavender. A gentle stream from a hose cooled the joint. She sighed, lowering her head until her muzzle nearly brushed his shoulder in tired gratitude, feeling her breath puff warm against his sleeve. He mixed crushed willow bark with warm water, forming a paste that his grandmother had sworn soothed both horses and hardworking humans, scents of willow and earth mingling gently. Smearing the poultice carefully, he explained each step aloud so she could match his tone to the mild sting of treatment, his tone matching the barn's easy quiet. The barn cat, a gray streak with curious green eyes, hopped onto a hay bale, observing the procedure like an unlicensed nurse, tail flicking approval from the hay bale. Satisfied with bandages and comfort, the cowboy spread a quilt beside the stall door, deciding no creature deserved to face the first night in a strange place without company, because solitude should never feel abandoned. He lay back, hat pulled over his eyes, though sleep came slowly while he listened to her rhythmic chewing and the whisper of wind through tin siding, marveling at how fates can pivot on seconds. Just before dozing, he thought how strange and wonderful it was that a single impulsive bid could rearrange two entire lives, that thought beating louder than his pulse. Dawn crept in on silent feet, tinting the horizon peach and gold while sparrows splashed chirps across the rafters, like sunrise pressed into feathered song. The mare lifted her head, ears forward, greeting the new light with a soft rumble that sounded like cautious optimism, hopeful notes rising with the steam. The cowboy brewed coffee on a camp stove, its smell mingling with sweet feet and due to form the day's first blessing, yellow petals framing a path of recovery. He unlaced the stall and invited her into a small paddock bordered by sunflowers that already tilted their faces toward morning warmth, a triumph invisible to any casual eye. Her gait remained uneven, yet each step looked a fraction smoother than the night before, and that fraction felt bigger than mountains, every number sounding like a small drum roll. He walked beside her in slow loops, counting strides aloud, celebrating every gain like children celebrate birthdays, sticky juice sweetening the morning breeze. When she grew tired, he halted, giving a scratch beneath her mane and a quartered apple as reward for bravery, neat rows of goals penciled with care. While she rested, he drafted a daily schedule on the back of an old feed receipt, outlining increments of exercise, rest, and gentle grooming, so even sunlight could read the plan. Mid-morning brought the vet, a kindly woman with silver glasses, who raised her brows in pleased surprise at the patient's alert demeanor, a practiced smile reflecting quiet pride. She flexed the injured limb, declared the tendons intact, and recommended gradual hill work once the initial tenderness faded, a prescription of patience she trusted. Hearing that verdict, the cowboy grinned wider than he had in months, feeling the barn walls expand with possibility, and the entire barn seemed to exhale. Before leaving, the vet scribbled her number under the schedule in case of emergencies, a small act of community that warmed the room, kindness stitched into the paper's margin. The mare nickered after her, as if saying thank you in the only language she knew, its gentle tone echoing through the stalls. Sun climbed higher, and the cowboy led his new partner back into the shade, dreaming of the day she might canter again across open grass, anchoring both their hearts to this new ground. Morning fog drifted from the paddock like steam from hot cocoa as the cowboy unlatched the gate and let Hope choose her own slow path along the sandy oval. Each hoofprint pressed a soft crater that filled with dew, telling a silent story of cautious determination in the growing light. He matched her speed, counting aloud to 10 before asking for the next careful step, so rhythm and patience would share equal honor. When her limp grew obvious, he halted, praising her effort with quiet words and a palmful of sweet feed that crackled pleasantly between her teeth. While she rested, meadowlarks sprinkled music over the fence posts, their cheerful trills turning the pasture into an open-air classroom about courage. A breeze tugged at the cowboy's hat brim, carrying the scent of mesquite blossoms and reminding him that even dry country finds ways to bloom again. He began gentle stretching exercises, lifting her leg until the joint pointed straight, then lowering it the instant her ears flicked in warning. Hope's breaths came slow and steady, fogging the early sunbeams, and he timed each motion to that quiet metronome. A pair of neighbor kids arrived on squeaky bicycles, offering to brush the mare while she cooled down, eager to help the miracle horse they had heard about. The cowboy handed them soft currycombs, explaining in plain words how circular strokes loosen dirt without hurting tender skin. Laughter floated up as loose hairs formed fluffy clouds on the barn floor, and Hope's eyes half closed the way people do during a favorite song. When brushing ended, he escorted her to a shallow creek running behind the orchard, hoping cold water would soothe the swelling like an icy compress. Pebbles shifted under her hooves, yet she stepped forward, splashing bright arcs that sparkled against early sunlight. The cowboy removed his boots, waited beside her, and splattered water across his jeans to prove that getting wet was part of the fun. Dragonflies zipped around their ankles, their tiny wings humming a tune that neither man nor horse understood but both somehow trusted. After 10 cooling minutes, he guided Hope onto soft grass, where she shook loose droplets in a glittering shower that made the children squeal. Back at the barn, he prepared a liniment of peppermint oil and aloe, ingredients simple enough to pronounce yet strong enough to ease aching tissue. He massaged the mixture from fetlock to knee, feeling muscle fibers relax beneath patient fingertips like knots untying themselves. Hope's tail swished lazily, a sign the sting had turned to relief, and the cowboy exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. On a clipboard, he logged today's strides, the creek soak, and her appetite, numbers and notes stacking into evidence that progress loves a record. By noon, the sun burned bright, so he walked her into the shade of the old cottonwood whose leafy branches whispered advice about pacing. They shared lunch, carrots for her, cheese sandwiches for him, and matching gulps of cool water that left droplets on chins of 2 different species. After eating, he fetched a bright blue beach ball, rolling it across the corral to awaken curiosity and stretch stiff joints in playful disguise. The ball bumped Hope's hoof. She snorted, nudged it back, then followed its wobbling escape like a puzzled dog discovering fetch for the first time. Each nudge lengthened her stride, and soon she advanced half the pen without a limp, too busy chasing the round intruder to remember pain. The cowboy clapped once, not to startle, but to celebrate, and the mare lifted her head as if accepting applause at a grand performance. Cloud shadows rippled over the hills, but inside the corral sunlight framed the scene like a giant spotlight aimed at everyday bravery. He ended the game before fatigue whispered trouble, believing victories taste sweeter when they leave you wanting another bite. During afternoon stall rest, he laid a radio near her door, tuning to a station that played slow country ballads with gentle guitar. Music drifted across fresh straw, and Hope's ears swiveled toward the speaker as though lyrics explained the day's lessons in secret code. While she dozed, the cowboy repaired a loose hinge, swept the aisle, and filled water buckets, letting useful chores fill the quiet. An hour later, the vet's silver sedan crunched over gravel, arriving unannounced for a progress peak that felt like a pop quiz. She watched Hope walk 3 straight lines, then measured joint circumference, nodding at a 2 millimeter reduction that made everyone grin. "Keep doing whatever you're doing," the vet said, scribbling a smiley face beside the measurement because science sometimes cheers too. Evening painted the sky tangerine, and cicadas warmed up their night orchestra as the cowboy led Hope to a hill dotted with purple thistle. They climbed slowly. At the summit, wind brushed their faces, and from that height the ranch looked small enough to fit inside a brave heart. Hope snorted at a distant hawk, amused rather than afraid, and the cowboy realized confidence now replaced the hollow space fear once lived in. Stars began poking holes through the darkening blue, and he promised a short ride in the saddle next week if tomorrow's swelling stayed down. She touched his shoulder with her muzzle, sealing the bargain in silent agreement more binding than any handshake. Together they walked back under a silver-rimmed moon, hoofbeats and footsteps syncing like twin drums tapping out the rhythm of a brighter tomorrow. Summer dragged its hot heels across the valley, turning creek beds shallow and making the barn smell like warm bread while Hope's coat gleamed brighter each day, proof that rest and kindness were winning their long race. The cowboy decided it was time for a new challenge, so he painted 5 cedar poles in cheery colors and laid them in a neat row to create a ground pole maze inside the training pen. On the first morning of the maze, he led Hope at a walk, steering her between the poles as if guiding a shy student through a school hallway crowded with lockers. She stepped wide at first, tapping one pole with a careless hoof, but instead of scolding, he laughed and circled back, letting her figure out the pattern like a puzzle meant to build confidence. By the third pass, she threaded the poles without a single bump, head high, mane flicking as though the simple victory tasted sweeter than orchard apples. The cowboy rewarded her with a juicy slice of watermelon, sticky pink juice dripping from her whiskers and making both of them look like kids at a county picnic. With poles mastered, he raised 2 of them on bricks to form ankle-high jumps, explaining that tiny flights would wake sleeping muscles while keeping strain to a whisper. Hope eyed the raised bars, ears swiveling like radar dishes, but after a soft cluck she hopped over, landing so gently the dirt hardly puffed beneath her hoofs. Each hop brought a brighter shine to her eyes, and soon she trotted a full circle, springing over the miniature jumps as if showing off for invisible judges. The cowboy stopped while energy still buzzed in her legs, believing lessons should end on a high note the way stories pause at a cliffhanger to keep readers eager. After a cool rinse at the creek, they rested in the orchard where bees hummed around peach blossoms and fallen fruit perfumed the air like nature's candy store. He slipped a portable radio from his pocket, tuning to a country station playing slow guitar ballads that matched the mare's steady heartbeat. While music drifted, he braided her mane into loose ribbons to keep it tidy, telling her that athletes need both strength and style when stepping onto a public stage. The next morning, he added a light saddle pad lined with fleece, buckling the girth loosely so cloth, not leather, touched healing skin, a gentle handshake between gear and horse. Hope sidestepped once, unsure about the weight, yet settled when he scratched the hollow behind her ear and reminded her they would never rush a promise. They walked the pasture perimeter under rising heat, cicadas buzzing like tiny power saws in the cottonwoods, while the cowboy counted her strides out loud in groups of 10. Counting kept his voice calm and steady, and by the 7th lap she dropped her head in a relaxed arc, a sign rider's call seeking the bit, though she wore only a soft halter. Satisfied, he cooled her legs with cold hose water, then filled a shallow rubber tub with crushed ice, letting her stand until the glittering melt carried soreness away. Late that afternoon, 2 neighbor boys delivered a letter from Mrs. Dawson, the pie-baking hero, inviting them to demonstrate gentle horsemanship at the upcoming harvest fair. The cowboy read the invitation twice, heart thumping, unsure if Hope was ready for crowds, but certain her story could plant hope in strangers the same way it had bloomed at home. He knelt in the straw beside Hope, showing her the envelope as though she could read the looping script, and promised they would decide together after a week of careful trials. That promise became a goal, and goals sprouted tasks. Longer walks, tiny canters, and new obstacles like fluttering flags hung on fence posts to mimic fairground noise. On Flag Day, he draped a bright checkered cloth across the fence. It snapped in the wind, but Hope only blinked, curiosity beating fear in a quiet contest of nerves. Next, he rolled a red plastic barrel into the pen and asked her to push it with her nose, teaching problem-solving through playful nudges that left dusty smudges on her velvet muzzle. She learned quickly that barrels moved easier if pushed from the center, and soon she chased it like a dog herding an obedient toy sheep across the arena. Each small triumph went into the logbook where numbers of steps, jumps, and heartbeats painted a graph of rising confidence more colorful than any fair poster. After supper, he reread the Harvest Fair schedule, noting a 15-minute demonstration slot right before the pony cart parade, a time when bleachers would be full and spirits high. The thought of crowds made his stomach flutter, yet he remembered the auction crowd and how hope had risen above whispers, so he let courage take the wheel again. At sunrise, he practiced mounting, sliding a child-weight saddle onto her back, then leaning across without swinging a leg, teaching her that riders could be gentle cargo, not hurting ballast. On the fifth lean, he swung one leg over, sitting lightly, hands resting on the pommel while she breathed deep, nostrils flaring yet body still as pond water at dawn. They took 5 steps, then 10, then a slow circle, and the cowboy's grin stretched wide enough to soak up half the sky, because the moment felt like claiming a treasure buried months under doubt. He dismounted quickly, ending the ride while success shone fresh, pocketing the memory like a lucky stone saved for darker days. Clouds gathered that evening, rumbling distant thunder, but Hope stood calm in her stall, listening to raindrops drum the roof while lightning lit the valley in white snapshots. In one flash, the cowboy noticed how her scarred knee looked sturdy, almost proud, a badge of survival rather than a mark of weakness. Rain cooled the air overnight, and in the morning the world smelled scrubbed and new, perfect for their longest trot yet along a path lined with glistening puddles. Hooves splashed silver fans of water, and when mud spotted the cowboy's jeans, he laughed out loud, deciding no fancy fairground could top the thrill of messy progress. That evening he called Mrs. Dawson, accepting the Harvest Fair invitation, his voice steady even while excitement jittered like popcorn inside his chest. He closed the phone, pressed his forehead to Hope's, and whispered that their next chapter would unfold beneath bright banners, funnel cake smells, and curious eyes. Hope blew warm breath across his cheek, a gentle puff that felt like a signed contract, sealing the plan with trust no lawyer could write. Together they watched the sun slip behind purple hills, its last rays painting the dusty arena gold, and both understood that tomorrow would bring harder drills, but also the promise of applause earned the honest way. Dawn glimmered soft pink when the cowboy eased the trailer onto the paved road that led toward the annual Harvest Fair 3 counties away. Hope balanced calmly inside, her ears flicking to the hum of tires as morning air smelling of cut hay drifted through the slats. Traffic thickened near the fairgrounds, banners snapping overhead while volunteers in bright vests waved cars toward grassy parking rows. A brass band tuning up sent cheerful off-key notes spiraling across the lot, making the mare prick her ears in curious delight. The cowboy unloaded her slowly, letting each hoof meet solid earth before asking for the next step, so confidence stayed high. Children in straw hats pointed excitedly, recognizing the horse from newspaper pictures taped to snack stands along the midway. He guided Hope to a shaded barn where draft teams snorted greetings and miniature donkeys brayed in playful rivalry. A kindly superintendent handed him a stall card labeled Gentle Horsemanship Demonstration, 12 p.m., Hope and Rider. The cowboy tacked the card outside, smoothing its corners as if straightening a cherished photograph on a wall. After settling the mare with fresh water and a flake of alfalfa, he walked the demonstration ring to study footing and spacing. Bleachers rimmed the arena, already half filled with spectators licking powdered sugar from funnel cake fingers. He paced the route twice, measuring stride lengths and imagining each cue he would give so there would be no surprises. Back at the stall, a reporter with a notepad asked why he still wore a frayed denim jacket instead of a fancy show coat. He answered that true respect shows in gentle hands, not glossy fabric, and the reporter scribbled every word. A loudspeaker crackled, announcing pig races, pie judging, and finally the upcoming demonstration that many had come to see. The cowboy tightened Hope's saddle one hole, checked the fleece pad for smoothness, and placed a simple rope halter over her nose. He breathed deeply, counting to 5, feeling his nerves line up like soldiers awaiting calm orders. When the gate steward signaled, he led Hope through a wide entrance framed by marigolds and fluttering state flags. Applause swelled like gentle thunder, yet the mare kept her head level, moving with steady rhythm born from months of patient practice. The cowboy mounted smoothly, letting rein stay slack so trust, not leather, guided the first circuit around a rail. Hope stopped on a whispered whoa, backed 4 straight steps, then pivoted on her hindquarters, drawing gasps from viewers seated high on wooden planks. Next, he steered her toward 3 brightly painted ground poles set in a fan shape that resembled rainbow spokes on wagon wheels. She lifted each hoof cleanly, clearing the pattern without touching a single bar, and children cheered as if witnessing magic. At midfield, he dropped the reins and stretched both arms wide, inviting the horse to continue at a quiet walk on voice alone. Cameras flashed, freezing the image of riderless control few thought possible from an animal once deemed worthless. Soft guitar music hummed through speakers, and the mare matched her steps to the tempo, tail swishing in time. The cowboy guided her to a low jump newly added that morning, whispering encouragement just before she tucked and sailed over. Dirt puffed beneath perfect landings. An elderly judge wiped moisture from her eyes, whispering something about second chances. For the finale, he dismounted, removed the bridle entirely, and asked Hope to follow a pattern of cones arranged like a winding river. She shadowed his shoulder, turning when he turned, stopping when he stilled, proving partnership can look like quiet choreography. At the final cone, he tapped his chest twice. She stepped forward, rested her forehead against his vest, and the crowd stood as one. Applause rolled over them in a warm wave, joined by whistling and shouts of bravo that echoed against metal roofs. The announcer's voice, thick with emotion, told a background story to anyone who had missed the news articles. As words filled the loudspeaker, people craned for better views, many blinking back tears at the idea of value discovered in unlikely places. The cowboy bowed toward the bleachers, then bowed deeper toward Hope, giving her the bigger share of credit. A ring steward hurried over carrying a blue rosette labeled Inspiration Award, pinning it to the mare's breast collar with careful hands. Hope sniffed the ribbon, lips fluttering, then blew a gentle breath that ruffled the steward's sleeve and drew laughter throughout the stands. Reporters surged forward for quotes, but the cowboy simply said that patience grows miracles the way sunlight grows corn. He led Hope from the ring amid a lane of extended palms, allowing children to stroke her neck and feel the warm reality of perseverance. Inside the cooling barn, he loosened the cinch, removed the saddle, and whispered that she had just shown the world what believing looks like when it finally takes flight. Long after the fair dust settled, postcards and emails poured in from strangers who had watched Hope's demonstration and found fresh courage for their own battered dreams. The cowboy spread the messages on the kitchen table each night, reading them aloud while cicadas drummed outside and the mare grazed beneath a honey-colored moon. One envelope held a child's crayon drawing of Hope wearing a superhero cape that fluttered like sunrise over green hills, and he pinned it beside the blue rosette in the barn. Inspired by the letters, he announced a Saturday open house, inviting anyone curious about gentle training to visit the ranch and meet the horse that transformed doubt into applause. Flyers handwritten in bright marker hung at feed stores, school bulletin boards, and the public library where librarians smiled at the promise of kindness on display. On the chosen morning, cars lined the dirt road like a parade of possibility, doors slamming and voices echoing with early excitement. Hope stood in the round pen, coat brushed to copper shine, eyes calm though the yard buzzed louder than locusts in July. The cowboy greeted families at the gate, handing out name tags and slices of cold watermelon that dripped pink juice onto happy wrists. He began the day by telling Hope's story in simple words, explaining that patience, not punishment, turns fear into learning a step at a time. Visitors leaned against fence rails while the mare demonstrated easy groundwork, yielding her hindquarters on a whispered cue and lowering her head when he touched her pole. A grandmother who once rode show jumpers wiped a tear, remembering horses she had sold when life grew hard, and resolved to volunteer at the local rescue. Toddlers pressed sticky palms against the warm boards, giggling when Hope's muzzle tickled their fingers in polite investigation. Next he led her over the painted ground poles, now arranged in a curvy rainbow, explaining that low puzzles teach balance before high hurdles appear. Teenagers filmed on phones, capturing every hoof step for social media posts sure to caption courage in bright emoji. After drills, he untacked the mare, letting children brush her while he described the difference between a curry comb and a dandy brush in friendly terms. Laughter mixed with the soft swish of bristles, and dusty hair floated like tiny parachutes in sunbeams cutting through the rafters. A retired carpenter offered to build new paddock shelters, trading lumber skills for the honor of being part of the next rescue story. The cowboy accepted gladly, seeing community rise around him the way grass sprouts after a warming rain. At noon, everyone gathered beneath a cottonwood where picnic tables sagged with potluck dishes, cornbread, peach pie, and crock-pots of sweet beans that steamed in the shade. Grace was spoken by a soft-voiced schoolteacher who thanked horses for teaching humans how to listen with more than ears. Hope napped nearby, one hind leg cocked, releasing deep sighs that fluttered her lips and proved peace needs no applause. After lunch, he unveiled a simple obstacle course, a tarp to walk over, a mailbox to nudge open, and a plastic bridge that clacked under weight. Volunteers formed a cheering lane while the mare tackled each challenge, ears forward, stride even, hooves tapping like confident drumbeats. When the mailbox clicked shut behind her nose, the crowd erupted, and a little boy shouted, "She's braver than superheroes," earning a chorus of agreement. The cowboy used that moment to invite everyone into a new program called Second Chance Steps, a free monthly clinic for owners of fearful or injured animals. Sign-up sheets filled fast, ink blotting lines as neighbors claimed slots for donkeys, goats, and even an anxious border collie. A local news crew arrived unannounced, camera lenses reflecting sky as a reporter asked what made this small ranch a beacon. The answer that brokenness never disqualifies anyone from greatness. It simply reroutes the journey through more interesting scenery. The quote aired that evening, and viewers across the state sent donations, bags of feed, rolls of vet wrap, and envelopes that rattled with spare change. With resources growing, he hired the teenage gas station attendant part-time, teaching the young man how to mix poultices and read the quiet language of flicking ears. Hope, meanwhile, relished her expanding fan club, greeting each newcomer with a gentle nicker that sounded like a door opening to fresh hope. One clear dusk, the cowboy led her to the highest hill on the property, where wind turbines on distant ridges spun like giant pinwheels catching tomorrow's promise. From that height, he could see the lane of cars departing, taillights blinking farewell, but also signaling future returns. He told the mayor that their story had outgrown two hearts, now living inside hundreds of minds that would spread kindness like seeds on traveling boots. Stars winked awake above them, and a meteor streaked past, carving a silver line across the black velvet sky like a signature on their shared adventure. Hope tossed her head, mane rippling, and the cowboy imagined she too made a wish, perhaps for open fields and endless companions. They descended the hill together, shadows stretched long, breathing in the cool scent of sage that rises after sundown in late summer. Back at the barn, he hung a new chalkboard titled Next Up, listing 3 auction dates and leaving blank spaces for future rescues yet unnamed. Before turning out the lights, he pressed his cheek to Hope's and whispered that first chapters end, sequels begin, and heroes sometimes wear horseshoes. Outside, crickets struck up their night chorus, and in that music the cowboy heard a truth stronger than any ribbon. Once kindness gallops forward, no gate can hold it back. Early autumn light slanted across the familiar auction yard, where weather-scarred boards groaned, hopeful bidders shuffle their boots, and the cowboy returned with hope to prove that second chances can sparkle brighter than first prizes when the sun hits just right. He stroked the mare's copper neck and promised she would only watch today, serving as living proof for any frightened animal that courage can grow even in rings built from fear and splinters. Farmers leaned across rails, tipping sweat-stained hats to the famous pair, their whispers warm with respect instead of the disbelief that once filled this place like choking dust before rainstorms. The auctioneers spotted the cowboy, grinned wide, and announced that the hero horse was back to bless the bidding, a cheer rising long enough to calm restless hooves behind the sliding gate. Lot number 12 stepped out, a pink gelding so thin his ribs looked like faded stripes on an old flag, tail lashing at flies that clung to sores shaped like small islands of pain. Hope nickered softly, and the gelding's ear twitched toward her, sensing steady reassurance from the copper mare who now stood ringside like a quiet guardian made of muscle and mercy. Opening bids began low, yet even low felt high for harvest-tight wallets, and the auctioneer's gavel echoed across yawning silence until the air itself seemed embarrassed by the emptiness. The cowboy waited, palm resting on Hope's withers, letting the moment stretch until urgency fluttered in his chest like a moth pounding toward porch-light glass. A teenage girl lifted her paddle, offering money saved from dog walking and lemonade stands, but a bulk buyer topped her quickly, valuing weight over worth with cold numbers that smelled of diesel fumes. Knowing that buyer's trailer rolled toward crowded feedlots where futures shrink to cents per pound, the cowboy cleared his throat and spoke a counterbid strong enough to snap every drifting gaze back to the ring. Gasps rippled, not at the dollar amount, but at bold kindness spoken without delay, proving generosity can sound louder than any loudspeaker when hearts are ready to hear. The trader calculated fuel, hay, and profit, shrugged, and waved off the deal, deciding skin and bones weren't worth wrestling legends of goodwill. One slam of the gavel flipped the gelding's fate, spinning it away from hopeless stops toward a road mapped by choice, care, and cracked open hearts. Children clapped while Hope bobbed her head, bronze mane glinting like a medal awarded for invisible bravery only quiet souls can see. Paperwork finished, the cowboy led his new recruit toward the trailer, matching slow steps so soreness could keep dignity intact. He spoke the same steady rhythm that once carried hope, painting pictures of orchards heavy with fruit, sunflowers taller than fence posts, and meadows that rustle lullabies at dusk. The gelding's nostrils widened, pulling in promises tucked inside those gentle word pictures, and his wary eyes softened the way hard ground softens after good rain. On the drive home, the cowboy checked mirrors often, seeing Hope's calm reflection teach the newcomer that rattling roads can be bridges, not endings. At the ranch gate, the barn cat awaited, tail flicking with supervisor pride as if sworn to inspect every creature entering rehabilitation headquarters. The cowboy unloaded his friend slowly, naming him Patch because resilience stitches broken pieces into quilts stronger and more colorful than any factory sheet. Patch limped toward deep straw, sighing when sore hooves met cushion instead of cracked planks, while Hope watched proudly from her stall like an older sister cheering graduation. In the days that followed, the cowboy copied Hope's old schedule onto fresh charts, tweaking lines to fit Patch's unique puzzle of aches and fears. Warm peppermint liniment tingled across tight shoulders, massage loosened knotted muscle, and buckets of sweet mash vanished faster than sunrise fog over prairie grass. Kids from the Second Chance Steps Club arrived with soft brushes and louder songs, practicing gentle strokes while humming campfire tunes Hope had grown to love. Patch dipped his head for braids tied with yarn scraps, learning that decoration can feel like respect when hands ask permission first. Meanwhile, the carpenter finished cedar shelters, and Patch stepped beneath the new roof, closing his eyes as shade cooled a back that once baked beneath neglect. Every small miracle joined expanding list pinned beside Hope's blue ribbon, proof that success multiplies when shared like laughter at long tables. One crisp evening, the cowboy guided both horses to the creek, letting swirling water soothe cracked hooves while sunset painted gold ripples that looked like liquid applause. Hope splashed like a foal, Patch copied, surprise lighting his face when laughter replaced fear inside his chest. Moonrise found them atop the big hill, silhouettes outlined against the sky scattered with stars, where the cowboy announced Patch would headline the next open house as a chapter still in progress. He told both horses that stories matter most when they invite listeners to pick up their own pens of kindness, turning spectators into co-authors. Letters kept arriving, and donated feed now stacked halfway to rafters, reminding the cowboy how far goodwill travels on whispers, Wi-Fi, and wonder. A nearby vet school requested to send interns eager to practice low-stress handling, proving classrooms sometimes smell of hay instead of floor wax. The cowboy agreed, spotting in their bright faces the same ember that once guided his own steps through tunnels of doubt. Week by week, Patch's ribs rounded, his coat showed mirror shine, and when he trotted a full paddock without limping, the cowboy's grin sliced dusk like sudden sunrise. Hope whinnied approval. The ranch dog barked 3 victorious notes, composing an anthem no radio could remix better. Blank slots on the chalkboard filled. Mabel the donkey, Rusty the goat, and even a nervous collie, each name representing another heartbeat rescued from a shrinking horizon. Standing beneath that board one windy night, the cowboy understood Hope had outgrown single stories. It now galloped on hooves, paws, and every volunteer's determined footsteps. He tipped his hat to the creaking barn, thanking beams, dust, and animals alike for teaching that brokenness is only chapter 1 in the long book of resilience. Outside, cool wind whispered across the pasture, carrying hints of winter, yet inside that breath rode an evergreen truth. While compassion keeps raising its paddle, despair will never win the final bid.